You're listening to Scaling Impact, the #1 podcast for conscious entrepreneurs changing the world. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Dandapani. Dandapani is a Hindu priest, entrepreneur, and a former monk of 10 years. His mission is to help people live a life of purpose and joy by empowering them with the tools and teachings that have been used by Hindu monks for thousands of years. He works with entrepreneurs globally, as well as large companies such as the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Nike, and Trivago in cultivating focus and managing energy. Dandapani and his wife are also passionately creating a 33-acre spiritual sanctuary and botanical garden in Costa Rica to further their mission. In this episode, we cover the topic of focus from many different angles. Dandapani shares the hidden pitfalls of splitting your energy among too many things, the key to unlocking unwavering focus, and his unique perspective on why the life of an entrepreneur and a monk aren't that different. He also speaks into a troubling trend he's noticed that is robbing financially successful people from living a fulfilled life, as well as why growing your consciousness is a requirement for scaling your business in today's world. Interesting points covered include why opportunity is one of the biggest threats to your business, how to uncover your true goal so you can align 100% of your energy behind it, the path of the monk and entrepreneur, and how they're more similar than you'd think, why entrepreneurs tend to grow faster in their consciousness than the general public, and the power of switching from externally seeking answers to generating them internally. So Dandapani, I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, James.
Thanks so much for coming. There's a number of things I'd love to talk to you about. First of all, I could maybe give you a little bit of an intro for anyone that doesn't know much about you. I'll say a couple things, and if you could fill in the gaps, that'd be great.
Okay, sure.
I know that you spent over 10 years as a Hindu monk, and you are a Hindu priest as well. You studied focus, you studied awareness, you've talked about Kundalini with me. Just on the side, we've had some great conversations about energy coming up into the pineal gland and very interesting things that I think the world is just starting to realize, and it's starting to become a little more popular to look at ancient Egypt and at Hinduism and at all these different traditions that have talked about that for a long time. But it's been out of focus, out of context. And it might seem to some people that this isn't to do with scaling impact. So everything we talk about on this podcast is about scaling and impact, business growth, metrics, the kind of left brain side of things, and then maybe the more creative impact side, social impact, environmental impact, and meaning. But I think that they actually must go together in order to create the best businesses and the most powerful ones that create a positive impact in the world. So there's a few things I want to talk about. I'll just give you a bit of a summary, but at first I wanted to allow you to introduce yourself and where you feel you're coming from.
So like you said, I spent 10 years living as a Hindu monk in a cloistered monastery in Hawaii. And then 10 years ago, my vows expired, so I left. So I'm no longer a monk, I'm a Hindu priest, as you say. And this is a traditional garb or outfit of a Hindu priest. And I work with entrepreneurs around the world, and that's pretty much what I do, usually in personal development. And I think, in the monastery, the real focus was about working on yourself. That was really the primary focus, with a very clearly defined goal of self-realization as where we're headed to in the monastery. And, coming out in the world and being an entrepreneur myself now and having my business and growing my business, I think one of the things I've realized working with entrepreneurs is that, so many of them are scaling their business and growing, but nobody is scaling themselves along as their business scales. So one is scaling and the other one is not. So what's going to give? It's the entrepreneur.
And one thing we always talk about is that inefficiencies scale just as fast as all the beautiful parts. And that's personal as well as to do with the business. So if there's things that have been left unchecked, even trauma or things like that that you have in your past that you haven't dealt with, it will come up.
It will, And if you don't take the time to work with yourself and scale with your business, then how would you handle the pressures of that?
And humans don't really scale. It seems like there's a linear kind of element to us as ourselves, although there is something very powerful that we can do in terms of growth and taking jumps, maybe from one awareness to another, and releasing things that are holding us back.
And scale might be the wrong word to use, but personal growth, and I always look at myself as going to the next best version of myself. And a simple way to look at it is, I'm going from version 2.1 to version 2.2, and then I would upgrade myself to the next version. But I need to keep working on myself and growing myself in order to be able to sustain and support the growth of my business.
Well, the first thing I thought we could talk about, a summary of what we hope to go into, exponential leadership. So the people that run these companies that by nature grow out of control. I've witnessed people, even myself, break down trying to control something that is uncontrollable. You can architect it in such a way that it is that it grows in the right direction, and that you have you're fostering the growth toward a certain direction. But it's very difficult to predict or to control the outcomes to everything you're doing, and you have to be okay with that to be able to lead an organization like that. So I want to talk about exponential leadership, and I think just through our conversation we'll start to understand what that looks like and what it is. Also, the householder path, I find that very interesting, and I wanted to get your comments and feedback on that, as well as people's intent toward humanity, the expectations that we feel on top of ourselves, that we put on ourselves, that we feel from others, that we feel from the world, as well as unwavering focus, which is the topic of one of your books and your course. So if we could start first with the householder path, one question that I'm sure you get all the time is, if you want to be close to God, or if you want to live a spiritual life, do you have to be a monk, or are you allowed to pursue something like a business or be an entrepreneur? And you seem to have done both. Can you talk about the two paths?
Yeah, and I can definitely talk about that. I think the first thing we should set in place is that it really comes down to what philosophy you subscribe to, because there's so many different philosophies out there, and I can only share the perspective of the philosophy that I subscribe to, which is Hinduism, right? And then so if someone doesn't subscribe to that, then what I'm saying might not align with their philosophy. So in Hinduism, there are two paths. There's the path of the monastic, and then there's the path of the householder. The monastic leads a celibate life. Monks live in cloisters with other monks or by themselves, and they pursue a life of service and also personal growth and self-realization towards enlightenment. Householders, Hindu priests fall under the category of householders, and typically householders get married, families, children, and they also can work and earn money. So you can be an entrepreneur, you could work at McDonald's, you can do whatever it is you want to do. You can be $10,000 a year, or you can make $1 billion a year. It doesn't really matter. That's the householder path. Both of those paths are looked at as equal and equally noble, with the ultimate goal that they're towards self-realization or enlightenment. The monastic is a much more focused, intense path towards enlightenment. The householder, there are 4 goals that are defined. The first goal is love, wealth, dharma, which is your duty, and then the last one is spiritual growth or enlightenment. So the goal of the householder is to to develop love and wealth through dharma, through the righteous action, through a clear, defined goal, towards getting towards enlightenment.
And when I read that, I stumbled upon the householder path as an idea. I thought it was pretty beautiful, and I was very surprised that it goes back thousands of years, and that I haven't heard much about it. But when I stumbled on that, I started to piece things together. You know, I get this feeling in the back of my head sometimes where connections start to be made, and I started thinking, oh my gosh, this makes a lot of sense. Now, dharma is one of those words where it actually means something a little different, I understand, in Buddhism than it does in Hinduism, and it's a general term that maybe is appropriated a little bit. But I do hear the odd entrepreneur talk about their dharma, their mission, that in the company that they're building, where they've maybe they have enough money for themselves, they have their needs met for their family, for themselves, and now they're doing something above and beyond that they feel is so important to them or so crucial that they're calling it a spiritual calling. They're saying it's something, you know, it's that important.
Dharma, their mission, right?
It's something that they can't not do because they will feel unaligned. And they've at least found it by certain actions that they've taken so far. So they've found the path, and they know they have a clear feeling or thought, I don't know if it's thoughts and feeling, but of when they're on the path and when they're off being distracted. Can you talk about dharma and what you believe the elements of it from the Hindu practice that you think would be valuable for an entrepreneur that doesn't maybe come from that background, but could use that as an understanding for themselves?
Yeah, no, for sure. But just before we touch on Dharma, just to finish up on the concept of the householder path, I think another really important thing, because you talked about, having a business and can we also then pursue spirituality. I think one of the big things, in the 4 goals, wealth, this is the second one. A lot of times people say to me that, if you're on a spiritual path, you shouldn't be pursuing wealth. Like money and spirituality don't go hand in hand. And it's actually a concept that in the philosophy I subscribe to, it's not what it's preached. One of the goals actually as a householder is to be as wealthy as possible. And that's why that goal, wealth, is right in there next to love. Right? So it's love, wealth, dharma, then enlightenment. And the concept here is that if you're wealthy, then you can look after your family, you can meet all your needs, which is part of your dharma, doing your duty to your family. You can also then help your community and impact the world. Because the only way you can impact the world is if you had resources to do so. Right? If you had no money, how could you go out and impact the world? How can you clean up the oceans? How can you help schools or orphanages or feed the poor? You can't. You need wealth. So the acquisition of the wealth is really important. And a lot of times people, especially with what I do, people look at me as a Hindu priest. I'm dressed up this way. They see I have an online course. They see me speaking. They're kind of like, why is he making money off spirituality? And I'm like, why is money a bad thing? People look at money as a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. I mean, it depends on what you do with it. But you can pursue a life of acquiring wealth and scaling and growing that wealth, and yet still pursue a spiritual life. How do you use that wealth? That's a different question.
And the way we tend to think of it at Exponential Ventures is profit is the fuel for the mission.
Right.
It's not the end, it's the means.
Yes.
And it's fuel that's mandatory based on the vision that you have. How big is that vision? You're going to need more fuel.
My good friend puts it very nicely. He says, profit is for the purpose of impact. And how do you want to impact?
I agree. And personally, my mentor, who's passed away now, but one of the things he told me, which was a startling revelation to me at the time, and I was pretty angry to hear it, but he said, James, I see your vision for the future. I see what you want to do in the world, and your lack of financial intelligence will undermine any success that you will ever have in your life unless you go and dedicate yourself to understanding money and how it works. and I was
what a great advice.
Yeah, it's great advice. My parents had gone bankrupt more than once. I did not have any really great examples or leadership or education in school, and I dedicated 3 years after that to understanding how money works, how the systems work in order to utilize elements of it for myself, and how to build a profitable company that could get me to the spot where I just that's when I realized that if I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of others. And I'd worked in churches and nonprofits and organizations that didn't have the funding available to do what they were trying to do. And then they had to, which happens with startups all the time, they had to succumb to the will of their investors or the will of their the philanthropists or the will of
the trustees that run the church. And
wherever the money comes from is where the direction comes from as well. And so I dreamt of this future where we could have enough for ourselves and then have a little extra and a little extra time to pursue things that were not monetarily motivated. And that's where we kind of came to myself, my wife, my family, for where we're at now. When it comes to intent toward humanity, that's something that we measure a lot. Just in our minds, we're trying to, it's silly to measure non-dual realities, but we think about founders, entrepreneurs that have this high level of intent toward humanity, positive intent toward humanity. And I see people like, say, Elon Musk or something like that, that to me has a very, very high intent toward humanity, thinking about how we can help humanity migrate to to be an interplanetary species, things like that, which are very lofty goals, as opposed to someone, with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, someone that needs to get food and shelter for their family. They're not at this place where they have the luxury of thinking like that or of working toward that. So as people grow, you talked about self-realization. If you were to think like an investor in exponential startups that were creating social impact, how would you assess intent toward humanity? What do you think are the markers of of that, or what would you look for in that founder?
I'll answer this question and the one you also asked me previously. I think with Dharma and doing your duty and your mission, I think it's also important as you scale your business to not forget your duty to the things that are outside of your business. So if you're married, your duty to your wife or to your husband, to your kids, right? Because, and you've heard me say this many times, we only have a finite amount of energy each day, right? At some point tonight, we're exhausted and we say, we have no energy left, I'm going to bed. So how do I take that 100% of energy I have each day and invest it proportionately to all the people and things that matter to me? And I think that's really, ideally, at the end of the day, the ability to define very clearly the proportionate investment of your energy to your priorities in your life. That is your Dharma. Right. And having that crystal clear, because if you don't, then you're going to put all your energy into scaling and growing the business, and then you're going to forget all the other things that matter in your life to you. So you have a family, right?
Yeah.
If I said to you, you have 10 hours to live, would you continue with this interview?
Yeah, because it's an hour.
And then you fly home?
Yeah. Well, I'd have to transport, I think.
Right. But you try to get home as quickly as you can to your family.
No, for
right?
sure.
You're not going to waste time. All of a sudden, you become crystal clear who and what's important in your life. And I think a lot of people, as they scale and grow their companies, and sometimes the company is growing so quickly and they're trying to keep up with it, is they forget who and what's important in their life.
Right.
They forget their duty, not only to the duty, maybe now they have met all the needs that they want to meet and they want to impact humanity. But as you're going out to impact humanity, don't forget the humans that are in your home.
Right. And a lot of people, some people talk and promote work-life balance. Some people in the entrepreneur world are really against that and they think it's impossible. For me, the only thing that holds me to my own integrity, and this might seem a little strange, is that I am not willing to sacrifice my family for my business. Yeah. But equally, I'm not willing to sacrifice my business for my family. Yeah. So there's two things that are very important to my Dharma, to my mission. And I know that they need to work together. And I need my wife to be on the same page with me in terms of letting me come and do this interview. Allowing me to do things like that, as well as be supportive at home.
And I think, the word balance, sometimes you think of a scale and a balance. And I think it's never 50% home and 50% work. That's why I like to use the word proportionate. Proportionate. Because you only have so much energy, and how do you proportionally distribute it, right? So I put way more energy into my business than I do into my family, but I do have a minimum amount of energy that I put into my family, and I make sure it never goes less than that. And as you know, I have a kid now. And I invest a lot of hours every day with my daughter, carrying her, feeding her, burping her, and I'm not willing to sacrifice that. And that's what I want to do, because part of doing my Dharma, my duty in impacting humanity, I need to also impact the humans in my life. Right. My wife, my daughter, the people that I care, my friends that I care, and make sure I call them, I text them, I check in on them. Right. Not just send an emoji, but actually put a few words. Right. Thoughtfully think about the text message.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's what so much of today's world forget. People forget in terms of scaling and growing.
Well, our focus can sometimes be a little too narrow, or our awareness can be very narrow, where you're trying to figure out a challenge at work and you're sacrificing, you're not being the person you would want to be to the Uber driver on the way to work, or the person that serves your meal, or the relative that needs a quick help during the day. There's things that people we'd want to be, and if we're only able to be that at the job, we're missing a lot of the point. And I wanted to get into expectations. So the example I gave earlier of Elon Musk, one thing that I find, I feel very sad for him in some ways. He's a hero of mine in some ways, and in other ways I feel like he has a real difficulty with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I don't think that that's for him to hold. It's not his responsibility in a sense. And it's not even, and so to put on himself the expectations that I need to save humanity, and a lot of social workers feel that, a lot of parents, there's a lot of people with a lot of expectations on them.
And I think entrepreneurs go through that a lot too, right? And if you've built a successful business and people know of it, then they expect you to be perfect in every realm. Maybe you built a business that's really successful now that all of a sudden, I'll give you an example. So I don't really follow tennis, but every now and then I'll watch a little bit. But Serena Williams was playing at Wimbledon and she got really angry on court. right? And all of a sudden the media's talking about her being angry. I don't really follow tennis, but I don't think she goes around claiming that she's someone who's in control of all her emotions. I think she talks about how she can play tennis, but all of a sudden people now place that expectation on her to be a perfect human being. Not only must she be a great tennis player, she should be this, she should dress a certain way, she should do this, she can never get angry. I remember taking a group to India once on one of my yearly retreats, and I got a little upset by a vendor that was trying to stiff me for a few rupees, right? And a couple of people in my group looked at me like, oh my God, you're getting angry. You get angry. I'm like, yeah, I go to the toilet just like you. I sneeze, I have diarrhea when I'm sick. Like, why would you place that burden of perfection on me when I don't even place it on myself? And I think a lot of people have that, especially entrepreneurs that build businesses. People place so much expectation on them. And I think the biggest problem at that point is that the entrepreneur then feels like he or she needs to meet those expectations. And that creates tremendous amount of stress on themselves.
Yeah, oftentimes when we do advisory with the founders of the organization, at the top of the organization, they don't have the ability to, or they don't feel they have the ability to really confide in their team or confide in the other people when they are going through a difficult time, or when their emotions are going a little nuts. Say you had a death in the family or something and you're trying to do your job at the same time. Just to have that ability to have someone to talk to. And surprisingly, a good chunk of those business advisory sessions is about grounding this person into reality a little bit and supporting them personally so that they can actually do their work, and helping them understand, just get a better context, give a listening ear to be able to listen to them, which a lot of people just don't feel like they have. Leaders oftentimes don't feel they have the ability to be that authentic with the people around them. And I'm seeing it change rapidly, where people are doing that, and maybe even doing it to a certain extreme. But it's definitely being redefined.
Yeah, I think all this is to lead to say, that I think with entrepreneurs, one of the big focus should be personal growth and personal development. If you're not spending time in a very structured way to grow yourself, then I think you're gonna run into problems in the years to come. And there needs to be a clearly defined path and a clearly defined goal. Not just, I'm going to a conference, I heard a speaker speak, this was really interesting, I'm going to take this and go home and apply in my life. I'm going to take that and apply in my life. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do. They go to different seminars and conferences and gatherings and mastermind groups, and they're taking bits and pieces of so many things. But if you were to ask them, do you run your company the same way? And they probably go, no. You don't attend 50 workshops and take bits and pieces, come back and throw it into your company and hope to run it. You take a much more clear, structured approach. You figure out, how do you want to impact humanity? How do you want to scale and grow? What's our goal? What's our vision, our mission? What are our values? What's our path to get there? There's a very clear, systematic approach that you take to growing your business. But then why, when it comes to personal growth, do people don't do the same thing?
Right. And I see the interconnectedness of all things, to a certain level sometimes. But when I do, I think, oh my gosh, like I'm ignoring certain areas and they must be affecting other areas.
Of course.
There's these links between every area. An example of that might be kind of funny is nervous system. I've noticed that my nervous system was actually in a really bad spot. I had adrenal fatigue. A lot of entrepreneurs that are, maybe too much caffeine, not enough sleep over an extended period of time, long days, and a lot of effort. They're burning out their adrenals and they're not really paying attention to their body's health. And they might look healthy on the outside, they might look fit, but there's something going on inside them where their nervous system is very weak. So I had to figure out how to grow my nervous system, and I had never really learned about it. I did some online research, talked to a few people, got some supplements, and figured out about hydration and sleep and a few other things. And within a short period of time, I was able to triple the strength of my central nervous system by taking that focus on one thing. And I decided not to really focus on any other health goals at the time, but just to do one thing as a regime to work toward it. And within a few months, I was able to get there.
But how much more powerful is that, to take that very structured focus approach than to just be random about the
Well,
whole
it feels
thing.
exciting. I've tried to do 10 health things at once, or even 2.
Yeah.
And to fail in both feels twice as miserable.
Yeah, no,
But to
exactly.
succeed in one,
Yep.
now I'm excited because I know how to, I figured it out. It did seem to really work. I feel a lot better. Now I think I have more stability to take on further challenges. And now the question is what's next? Because I've come from a success. And
Yeah. And also, I think, what's next should be driven by where are you going, as opposed to, okay, I've worked on my nervous system.
right.
Somebody's been talking about developing this, and I think that sounds really fascinating. I think I might go explore that.
The next YouTube video was about this, so I'll take on that.
Yeah, and I went to this event and I heard this guy speak, and I'm really fascinated about taking ice baths. So maybe I should do ice baths. It's going to really help this. But there's no clear plan. Where are you going, and what is your ultimate goal? And I think that should be clearly defined. And once you define the goal, then it's so much easier to know what to do next. And most people don't know what to do next because they don't know where they're going.
Right, and let's talk about that for a quick moment. Where are you going? Underline the word you, specifically the individual. Where are you going? And no one else can tell you that. You can't, a lot of people are, actually entrepreneurs are amazing at finding opportunity and then contorting themselves to the opportunity. And so when it comes to things like this, they're often saying, well, you tell me how I can earn more money or how I can be healthy or things like that. And then I'll contort myself into the image to try to get to it. Whereas I think it takes a lot of maybe just time on your own to really get clear. How do you get clear on or refocused if you're really busy working around with other people a lot, doing your courses, doing traveling and speaking? How do you get back into that center?
By spending time with myself, in a morning routine, a morning practice. And, I always tell people, most people don't really know what their purpose in life is because they never spend any time with themselves. So we spend some time with each other, and we've hung out in San Diego and had dinner and drinks and chatted and, late into the morning. And the more time I spend with you, the better I get to know you. But that's the only way I can get to know you is actually to spend time with you. So if you ask the average person how much time do they actually spend with themselves, and most people probably say hardly any. People will give you excuses like, oh, when I walk my dog every day, that's me spending time with myself. And they're like, no, that's walking your dog. And I'm talking spending time with yourself. It's when you actually sit down, close your eyes, and actually have a conversation with yourself. When you're not listening to music, you're not reading anything. The same way that I would sit with you and I would ask you questions and you would ask me questions and we actually get to know each other. So imagine if you closed your eyes, you sat down and had a conversation with yourself, and you did this every day consistently, even 5 minutes in the morning every day. After 6 months, you'd really get to know yourself. You know what's important in your life, what your purpose in life is. And you talked about entrepreneurs pursuing opportunity, and I think, I talk a lot about focus, and I think, one thing I've learned, having lived here in New York and having my own business, is that opportunity is one of the greatest distractions in the world.
I agree.
It totally is. If your opportunity is not aligned with your purpose, then it's a major distraction. When I left the monastery and I started building my business, and once it started to grow, I had so many opportunities coming my way, people that wanted to partner and do things and new projects, and I was all excited. I said, I can do all of this. And I remember speaking at an event in Toronto, the Mastermind Talks, which our friend Jason Gaynard runs. There was a gentleman that spoke there, Mark Echo. And after he spoke at the event, we were backstage, and I asked him, and this was a few years after I left the monastery, I said, Mark, and he had built $1 billion business from nothing.
Yeah, Echo.
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, hey, if you had one piece of entrepreneurial advice to give an ex-monk who's learning to be an entrepreneur, what would it be? He said these words: stay narrow and deep. And I love that. That's become my mantra: stay narrow and deep. He says, as you start to grow and scale, you'll find so many opportunities coming your way. Right. But if they're not aligned, don't take them.
Yeah, we had a moment in a team meeting recently where we were talking about how our I was trying to figure out how to word this, and I just said, our vision keeps expanding, which requires our focus to become more narrow.
Yeah.
And we think exponentially, meaning one output should equal 10 further outputs, but only if we get the one right. Yeah. And so trying to work on 10 outputs and missing 5 of them, and we just need to focus oftentimes as an organization, as a entrepreneur, as a person, on one thing at a time, and we live oftentimes in a world of multitasking where that's now, it seems like the new hypnosis, that is a good thing and we should all be doing it all the time, to the point where I have a hard time being alone with myself for extended periods of time. And I asked my wife a little while ago, I'm like, I was in Utah, and I asked if I could stay an extra couple days. I'm like, you know what? I know you want me back with the kids to help out and stuff like that, but I think I'm onto something, and I need some time to digest what I just learned. I was thinking about, and I had to make up this. I had no excuse for it. Almost, I said, I just want to be alone for another couple of days, and she was very understanding about it and said, sure. But there was also this thing in my mind, like, why? Why are you wanting that? Why are you doing that? And I couldn't come up with an answer that would usually satisfy me. But from doing that, and like now it's a bit of a ritual where every couple months I'll do that. And I bake in a few hours every week, 3 hours every week, where it's kind of a focus time like that too. But it's hard to sit and not touch your phone and not interact with any people. And I found this beautiful moment, probably an hour or two in, I had nothing to do. And then I had this little fire pit, and I went and I started to chop a piece of wood. And it felt like a spiritual experience, and nothing was going on. But I felt alive in a certain way where I could feel my own energy reverberating very strongly. And I didn't have any thoughts going through my mind. I was just chopping a little piece of wood, and I was like, what's going on? You know, it almost felt like a bit of an altered state just from being alone for so long, quietly, and holding my own peace. And then all this clarity started to come after I could get past that, boredom, and then, what's next, and then a little bit of a...
But how many people, people have those experiences, right, where they go away in a retreat or they do something like that and they talk about it. But then my question to them is that how many times now have you gone and recreated that experience? It just becomes a one-off experience that happened a year ago that people talk about. People come up to me all the time. Hey, I went and did this Vipassana retreat 2 years ago. Last year I went and did this for 2 days. It was really amazing. And that's what they're talking about. Something they did 2 years ago for a day.
Right.
Why aren't you doing it? If it's so great, why aren't you repeating it? Why isn't it part of your lifestyle now?
Right.
Why is it something that you just did 3 years ago that you're talking about it? Make it part of your life. And I think, it all comes down to, for me, is what is your purpose in life? And I think as an entrepreneur, that if you want to impact humanity and all that, that's wonderful. But you really have to clearly define your purpose in life. And once you have that becomes your dharma, your focus point, right? And then from there, it's so much easier now to realize how much energy you need to put into impacting humanity. How much energy do you put into impacting the people in your home, your loved ones, your friends? Right. But if you're not clear and that's not defined clearly, then there's just no guidelines.
Right.
And you can scale and grow, and then you'll find yourself just burnt out or end up wherever you end up being. And
as an advisor and investor in companies, we often are helping people with strategy. And they'll often say, I need a better strategy for this. I need a strategic overhaul of this and that. And I'll say very clearly, what's your objective? And then we end up spending, like say it was a 90-minute strategy call, we end up spending almost all of it on them getting clear on their objective. And I say, I have no ability, I'm a great strategist, I have no ability to help you until you know where you're going.
Exactly.
And it's actually difficult to the point where I often try to send them to other people that can help them get clear on their objective so that when they come back with a very clear objective, I can very quickly map out a nice strategy to get them there quickly.
It's amazing, James. I work with entrepreneurs and I ask them one simple question: what's your purpose in life? And most people cannot answer. If I asked you, what color is your hoodie? What would you say?
Blue.
Blue, right? You don't need a paragraph to explain it. When I ask people what's your purpose in life, they ramble on for 5 minutes, which tells me they have no idea. Very few people can answer in 5 words or 10 words. I asked a lady in San Francisco last week, what does your company do? She said, we make loans affordable. We make loans affordable. How clear is that?
Yeah.
She knows so clearly what her company does, and she can say it in 4 words that I can understand. Then I asked her, what's your purpose in life? And she talked for 5 minutes. No idea, right? So then how then can you grow and become clear and set guidelines or priorities in your life if you don't really know what you want?
So Unwavering Focus.
Yeah.
Is it a book and a course?
Yes, I almost done with the book, going through edits right now.
Awesome.
I will create a course first, which is going to launch next year in the middle of March.
Great.
And then after the course is launched, we will publish the book.
So, not to give away any spoilers or anything like that, but if you were to pitch the book to an entrepreneur, or just the concept of, selling focus to an entrepreneur that is very distracted, what would you say to them that you think could actually incentivize them to stop with what they're doing?
Yeah. Because I think, as an entrepreneur, you have few things are limited, right? Money, time, energy. The more focused you are, the better you are at utilizing your time and energy. But with focus also comes clarity, right? People come up to me and say clarity of purpose, right? So people come up to me and ask, Dandapani, can you help me focus? And I go, yes, I can. And then I ask them, so once you learn to focus, what are you going to focus on? And they go, I have no idea. So focus needs to go with purpose.
So focus is the strategy, but the objective.
Yeah, what are you going to focus on?
Right. Or what's the reason?
So for an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs are very clear what their business is about. That I very rarely met an entrepreneur that's not clear where their company is going. Most of them are quite clear, right? So then how do you stay focused on the goals of the company? The same way, like, Mark Echo said to me, stay narrow and deep, right? Stay focused on your goals, because as you're building your company, there's so many opportunities to get distracted, opportunities that come your way, people that want to partner, do different things. And the ability to stay focused and say no is, I think, what will help you grow your company. A few years ago, I met this gentleman named Ralph Schrungen. He's the founder of Trivago, a co-founder of Trivago, the travel company. And, one of their goals, company values, is focus. And if you look at their company, they do hotel bookings. They don't do anything else. And he's said to me many times, people have come up to him and offered him, why don't we partner? When someone buys a hotel room, then, they need insurance, they need a car, they need maybe a vacation package. Why don't we just partner and do this? And he goes like, no, we just do hotels. And that's all they do. They just do hotels. And they're super successful. But how many people can actually do that?
Right.
Everybody wants to diversify, and very few people can actually just stay focused on one thing and do that extremely well. And I think Trivago, is a great example of a company that's just done so well in a short space of time, but they purely focus on just that one thing.
Wow. Yeah, I think entrepreneurs need to focus on their unique path, what they can bring to their work. I see the uniqueness of different people, the uniqueness of you versus me, very different, very unique, and I see it with everyone. But oftentimes people don't recognize it within themselves, just how unique they are, and custom suit their job. If you're an entrepreneur, you get to make the rules. You get to create the life that you live in terms of work. So why not align it with the way you like to spend your time, your money, and your energy, with the people that you want to be around, and all of these things that you can customize to yourself.
But you need to be clear what those are first, right?
Right.
And unless you take time to spend with yourself each day and really do that self-inquiry work and figure it out, you're never going to know.
Right.
And I think so much entrepreneurs just put all the energy into their business and growing their business and feeding their business that they never spend time with themselves and figuring out what their priorities in their life are. Who are their friends?
So that's a self-awareness, maybe a consciousness. Do you have any comments? I'm a futurist. I don't believe there's one future. I think there's multiple, and we play the role in terms of getting there. In the future, do you see a trend regarding consciousness that you feel in general is moving? Do you feel like entrepreneurs, being an entrepreneur, and I bet you attract a unique type of entrepreneur around you. Do you feel like entrepreneurs are growing in consciousness or awareness at a different rate than other people? Or do you feel like there's certain subgroups in society that are actually onto something and growing really quickly when it comes to consciousness? I'm always looking for people that seem to be more and more aware of some of the problems and then wanting to help create the solutions.
Yeah. I think two thoughts on that. One is just also about something you were saying earlier about Elon Musk, and how you look up to him as someone that you admire, and his vision to go and look into space for opportunities, and there are others that are doing that as well. I want to say as well, as we're looking to impact humanity, and not, I mentioned about not forgetting the humans at home when you're impacting the humanities outside of home, but to also not forget that the environment that we live in. We're spending billions of dollars going to Mars to look for what?
Right.
It's a planet that's red with gravel and dirt. And we live on this beautiful planet that has rainbows, waterfalls, oceans, life, I mean, the most majestic planet in this galaxy. There's nothing else equal to this. Why are we forgetting what we have and going into space looking for something that there's nowhere equal to Earth?
Well, partly what I'm getting at, without getting all negative about the problems going on, is that we seem to be the only species bent on destroying our own resources and destroying our own planet.
Totally. And then going into the future, going into space looking for better solutions. Why? It's the most ridiculous thing, And I think, you talked about personal growth and working on yourself. So many of us want to go and impact humanity, but we don't spend the time to impact our own lives. And I think as we change ourselves, we can impact humanity greater. In the same way, focus on what we have. Don't forget what we have. We can't look after what we have. How can we look after what we find? Literally, seriously. If you can't look after what you have, how can you look after what you find? You can't look after the people in your home, the things you have, possess, and yet you want to go out and do all these things. Yeah. And I think the future really needs to be focused on people becoming more conscious of what they have and looking after what they have, which is their own personal life, their families, and their environment. And that's where it needs to be. And the other point I wanted to share is that, yes, I do feel that entrepreneurs are growing in consciousness quite often faster than a lot of people, because I think it's part of, entrepreneurs are always looking to scale and grow their business, and part of that they require to evolve as well. They need to learn and grow, because if they're not learning and growing, then they can't grow their business as much. And I think they need to adopt a attitude of being humble and knowing that you don't know everything. Right. And therefore, I'm willing to learn and grow.
Right. It seems like there's these great opportunities. It's not because they're running a business, it's because they're taking on big challenges.
Exactly.
That almost threaten the ego in some ways, or challenge you to go further than you've gone before. Yeah. You could say, as I know you just had a baby recently, a new parent, I feel like there's a real opportunity there for growth.
Oh, for sure. In so many ways.
I think Dr. Shafali, who we're going to be interviewing, she talks about, she was just counseling people in general, and then she started to really focus on conscious parenting. But she said the reason why was because the parents often had this ego crack, and that's those people that she could tend to work with a little bit more. She just noticed a trend where it was like, oh, this person knows their life is out of control. They like there's things coming up for them that now are presenting an opportunity for her to do her work. And I feel like entrepreneurship provides a lot of challenge for people as well. Well, I'd love to wrap it up a little bit. I appreciate having you on.
No, of course.
But I would love to give it over to you to say any kind of final things that you'd like to get out there, or to comment on that we've talked about.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One is, I believe in the philosophy of reincarnation. That's something I subscribe to. But I know I only have one life as Dandapani, and I do really want to make it an amazing life. And I do know that on my deathbed, I want to be able to look back on my life and go, that was really amazing. That was a really amazing life. And in order to live that amazing life, I need to be clear what my purpose in life is. Because if I'm not clear what my purpose in life is, then I don't know what to focus on, right? Once my purpose in life is going to define my priorities in my life. Once my priorities are defined, I know what to focus on. Then the next step after that comes, how do I simplify my life? How do I simplify my life so that I can stay focused on the priorities in my life that were defined by my purpose? And then the final step is I call sacrifice. And what am I willing to give up? Who am I willing to give up in the pursuit of simplifying my life so I can stay focused on my priorities in my life, which are defined by my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that all figured out, then it's very easy to, as an entrepreneur to grow your business, because then you're growing within a very clearly defined path. And it's easy to say no to people. It's easy to say no to things. It's easy to say no to opportunities and distractions, because you know exactly where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you have that clearly defined, then you don't really do as much, and you can't impact humanity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that needs, and the only way to do that is to really through self-inquiry. And approaching self-inquiry needs to be in a very structured way. You can't approach self-inquiry by just going on a retreat because you're feeling stressed. I need to go to a meditation retreat or a yoga retreat or some spa thing, because it doesn't work. You never approach your company that way, right? When your company is going on a challenge, do you go off on a business retreat?
Right.
You don't do it that way.
No.
You hire people, you hire advisors, you talk to people that can guide you, right? You take a very structured approach to solve problems and go forward. And with personal growth, it needs to be the same way as well.
The word that keeps coming to me is intention. When you're talking about that, a lot of people understand the word purpose.
Yeah.
They might understand the word intention. Do you feel there's a supernatural element to intention? There seems to be a magic that I've found where when you have that clear intention, things start to align, or resources start to appear. It's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
No, I totally believe that. If you look at the mind and in a very simplified way, you can say there are three states. There's the conscious mind. If you look at it as a three-story building, the bottom floor would be the conscious mind, the second floor would be the subconscious, and the third floor is what we call the superconscious area of the mind. Your conscious mind is your external area of the mind that's tied to your five senses. The subconscious is your hard drive. It stores all your experiences from the past. Your habit patterns are created there. And your superconscious area of the mind is your creative, intuitive, spiritual area of the mind. When your awareness, we talk about awareness moving within the mind, and you've heard me speak a few times. When your awareness is functioning in the superconscious area of the mind, the characteristics of the superconscious area of the mind is that it has good timing. You're always at the right time at the right place. You meet the right people when you need to meet them. That's when you're functioning in the superconscious area of the mind.
Right.
So when you talk about supernatural abilities of being at the right place or meeting someone at the right time, that was just opportunistic to help you personally or in your business, then that person is functioning in the superconscious area of the mind.
Right.
The people that are always saying that, bad things always happen to me, I'm always at the wrong place at the wrong time, they're not functioning in the superconscious area of the mind. They're more in the subconscious or in the conscious area of the mind. So yes, I do believe in that supernatural. I call that someone's actually functioning in the superconscious area of the mind. And it's that state of mind is available to every single human being. It's knowing how to get there and stay there. Because the longer you stay there, the more access you have to the characteristics of that area of the mind. It allows you to be observant, it allows you to have great timing, and a whole bunch of other things. So why would you not live there?
Right. Wow. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you having the chat.
Thank you, James.
So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We take every listener to this podcast very seriously, and we'd love to keep in touch with you directly. So please subscribe to our Scaling Impact community by subscribing to our email list at exv.ai/podcast. That's exv.ai/podcast.